So our next speaker is CEO and founder of Vastari Group, an online marketplace securely connecting private collectors of art, exhibition producers, venues, and museums for exhibition loans and tours. Bernadine Vida will talk about the issues we need to address in order for audiences to start paying tickets to attend virtual exhibitions, to start investing in artworks online through cryptocurrencies, for art shipping to be tracked in real time, and for artists to see a return from their art using smart contracts, and much more. So a slightly different topic, but very welcome, talking about art and getting people back onto, let's say, how to make money online, etc. from events. So the talk is entitled State of the Art, Unlocking New Revenue Opportunities for Business in the Web 3.0. So over to you, Bernadine.
Hello, everyone from London. My name is Bernadine Bröcker Wieder, and I work with museum exhibitions. But more specifically, I guess you could say that I work at the intersection of art and technology. And today I'm going to be giving you a presentation about unlocking new revenue opportunities in Web 3.0. But because I work with art, I'm going to be using art as the point of departure. So let's talk about the state of the art. In London, my company operates an online platform for the museum industry. So we operate a digital marketplace to bring in real life experiences like this exhibition about Andy Warhol to museums around the world. Of course, this industry is suffering significantly because of the global pandemic in 2020. The whole industry has lost so much income because most of what we earned was through ticket sales, merchandising sales, and basically relied on you being physically at the museum. So it's going to be a problem for a long time. Governments are going to be forcing people to find ways to make money. And the first thing that everyone thinks is, let's start making money online. Can we just put everything, all of this content that we were putting together onto the web? And can we then take advantage of all of these online opportunities out there? And I definitely think that there are really amazing opportunities to generate revenue in what we could call Web 3.0. But before we start thinking about these opportunities, there are a few things we have to realize about the semantic web and about Web 3.0. I'd like to present a few things about semantic web, then a few examples where technology, specifically in my industry, the art industry, are showing new opportunities that have a bit of a spark of potential. And then lastly, I'm going to be a little bit pedantic about the semantic web and look at the details that are necessary to be defined before we can really start making money online. So let's begin. Now, the word semantic comes from the ancient Greek word for significant. And as you know, I'm based in London, so this seems like a very British way of saying, hello everyone, this is a bit of a significant thing that we need to deal with. It is a significant thing. It's very important to be able to define what is the system of signifiers that we use to understand the world. And especially as the world is starting to intermesh the digital and the physical, it's been even more important to be able to define what the semantics is of the semantic web. So this is really a significant issue. So what does this mean in real terms? As the CEO of a growing startup, I have to speak many different languages. By different languages, I don't mean English, French, Spanish, Mandarin. I mean tech speak and non-tech speak. I mean digital speak and in real life speak. Our product and marketing teams and our salespeople and our developers all need to understand each other. It's a constant game of translation. But as I was hinting at before, it gets even more complicated when you look at the combination of digital and physical. So many things are starting to get intermeshed together. And because in the last 30 years, we've had this huge growth in what technology has developed, our jargon has not caught up yet. And if we look at history, this isn't something new. I'd like to take you back to a time when creativity and innovation was also really greatly impacted by technology. And that technology was the camera. In the early 20th century, the fact that you could take a photograph of a work was basically the same thing as trying to do a painting of it. And so it caused some upheaval. The camera was invented in 1839, but the upheaval really started to happen after the Kodak camera started coming about in 1888. Anyone, not just a professional, could take a photograph. And what was the meaning of painting and other creative media if you could take a photograph? That's why I love looking at this image. It's called The Betrayal or The Treachery of Images by René Magritte. You might have seen it before. It is currently based in the Los Angeles County Museum of Art. It is a pipe, but it is not a pipe. It is a signifier demonstrating a pipe. What Magritte and his contemporaries are talking about is that is this really the thing that it is showing? And if you think about it, we needed to develop a new language to understand if this is a pipe or this is a painting of a pipe, or is this a photograph of a painting of a pipe? One of Magritte's contemporaries, Man Ray, said it similarly. He kind of started saying that this medium needed to be used in a different way. He said that you need to try and photograph the idea rather than the object itself. And here's an example of an image by Man Ray. He's using everyday objects, but trying to demonstrate an idea through the medium that he's using. Now, going back to the pipe. There's an even bigger problem in 2020 than what was happening in 1929. Not only is this not a pipe, this is not a Magritte. This is a slide that I've prepared that I'm sharing with you on Zoom via Google Slides that is a pixelated JPEG of a pipe that I found on Google. So, what does that mean for the value of this image? This digital artwork? Is this something that is valuable? And then the other side of the equation is that the in real life object, the pipe, the original pipe that Magritte used to make this piece, no longer exists. It has deteriorated, but its life continues through this painting, hanging in the LACMA and as a digital image that you can Google. But it's complicated, right? So if all of these signifiers reference the same thing, are they referencing the painting? Are they referencing the original pipe? Are they referencing Magritte? Are they referencing the Los Angeles County Museum of Art? And if that pipe that was painted by Magritte wasn't destroyed, would it have a value today? I'm actually thinking about this because as we were having so much chaos after 2020's coronavirus pandemic for the exhibitions and events industry, a lot of what was lost in translation at that time was the meaning of what you were looking at and why it was valuable. We were suddenly all looking at objects on a screen. It was an infinite amount of images. And then basically we didn't have rules and procedures to be able to develop a new value chain for these infinite images. So basically, this is trying to show to you the problem with the semantic web that we need to solve in order to generate revenue. So I'm going to give you a few examples of why this gets even more complicated than the copyright law that might have been developed as a result of photography in the 20th century, because of the examples of how we are now having virtual spaces for digital content that goes into physical spaces, physical content that's going into physical spaces, and different types of value attributed to each. But really, all of these types of examples are inspiring me to think of so much potential. A bit like this kid who just came out of a virtual reality art museum brought to you by Mighty Masters. There is a lot of potential. What this kid was looking at is the Kramer collection. It is a virtual reality museum that a family produced of paintings that are hanging in midair from the time of Rembrandt. And children can go into this experience and see the paintings hanging at their height. And they can walk around them. They can run through the halls. Using HTC Vive, they can really explore these intimate objects in a way that they wouldn't be able to if they saw them in the Metropolitan Museum of Art, for example. It's much more than what you could experience from the Kramer collection on their website. Another example is of a virtual reality exhibition that's happening in a physical space. Marshmallow Laser Feast brought an experience to the Saatchi Gallery in London, where it's a headset with a breath sensor, with sound, and with smell. An experience that is trying to help you understand what it feels like to go inside the middle of a tree. It's abstracting oxygen and carbon dioxide to be synchronized with your breath so that you can really experience something. Another example of something that's kind of interesting that's starting to happen is also related to VR. The Phi Center in Montreal is offering you to be able to hire out headsets to go so that you can basically experience these things at home rather than in a museum. So right now with the pandemic, you can't go to the museum to experience something. So could you then experience it at home? The other example is using AR. You can bring art to your own phone and then have it anywhere. Cause worked with Acute Art to create AR artworks that you can load onto your phone and view, for example, here in front of the Tate. And Damien Hirst did a similar thing with Snapchat, where he created a filter that would create spin paintings, and the earnings from that filter went to his chosen charity, Partners in Health, that were working with the coronavirus pandemic. My last example, or actually my second to last example, is the British Museum digitizing objects on Sketchfab so that you can use those assets at your own discretion. Some of these are open source. And lastly, you have Nifty.Inc., an evolution of quite a few other NFT artwork platforms, and there are many out there. But what's interesting about this one is it's so easy to use, and you can create artworks that immediately are put onto the blockchain and can be sold. It's just in beta. But what's interesting is we have to get a little bit pedantic about these types of examples to start understanding where the revenue can come from. All of these examples of really interesting ways in which we're getting AI, different machine vision, all of these new technologies working towards creating new artistic experiences and exhibitions, we have to think about how is it going to make money? People are used to thinking of a lot of online experiences as something that you would experience for free. And that's where I think we have to get pedantic about the semantic web. We have to start defining certain very specific things to be able to unlock revenue. So it's almost like we can't let it go free. We have to go back and think about what exactly we're talking about. So the first question is, what exactly do you mean? And what I mean is, even in this talk, because of the type of audience that I'm expecting you guys to be, I'm talking about VR, AR, XR, NFTs, and without defining it. But the truth is, if you go to Nifty.Inc., their goal, as posted on Medium, is that if anyone comes along and uses this like they would use Microsoft Paint, that they could create an artwork and get onboarded onto crypto without ever understanding what a distributed ledger is, and no need to have to download anything. So we really need to get away from the acronyms and that area, that whole thing of exclusivity, and look at what you actually mean when you're trying to do something. The next thing is about interoperability of formats and being able to define exactly what format something is in so that you can then understand the value of that format. So what exactly do I mean by that? I mean that currently there is an inexorable, a good example is on VR. The content is linked to the container inexorably often. And the truth is, this is a slide from 2009 talking about CSS. We have to separate the content and the container. If we were able to understand that that Kramer collection exhibition is able to tour to other digital locations, or if the Kramer Museum was able to host other content in its virtual space, we would be able to look at new business models. But because it's all been meshed into one, it's very difficult to be able to create opportunities. Remember that I showed you the Sketchfab gallery of objects from the British Museum? What if we could import those objects into the Kramer Museum, and those kids with those amazing faces being amazed could view those objects? If we could figure that out, then we could be able to have the British Museum maybe charging a ticket to come into the Kramer Museum. Maybe the Kramer pays a licensing fee to the British Museum to be able to use those 3D models. Whatever we're doing, I think that there needs to be a better definition of, or rather separation of content and container. Then the next question we have to answer, if we're being pedantic about the semantic web, is whatever we're defining, we also have to define what its use is. Right now, we, for example, have amazing things on Sketchfab from the British Museum that are 3D models that you can look around, etc. And sometimes it tells you if you can 3D print it, etc. But what if we could get some photogrammetry of museum objects that are in storage and give them some effects that help them bend or be very compatible for a video game or a movie? What if we could define certain file types that are specifically importable to specific environments? Then we could start looking at having an earning model for those specific file types. But currently, we don't really have a standard of defining what it's used for. It's just a 3D model. So if we could get some kind of universal language going about what we're talking about when we talk about a 3D asset and what it's going to be used for, then we could get a lot better. Also, for example, what if you have an audio file describing this object? What would you call it? Would you call it a voice? Would you call it a tour? Would you call it a media guide? There are too many terms, and it's not clear how that is linked to this 3D object and image. And linked to the container and content story, I think we have to be honest what the objects are for. At the beginning of the lockdown, even before the lockdown, the art world was starting to use another acronym called OVR, Online Viewing Room. When I hear the acronym OVR, I think of a virtual reality room. But the truth is, OVRs are often just websites or a 3D rendering with a chair next to it so that you can get some idea of size of a white-walled space. That is not an interactive, immersive experience. This is not something people would pay for. This is a reference image. This is, if we go back to the pipe example, this is just trying to show the pipe rather than being a new experience with the pipe. If we think of an OVR, how I would have imagined it, it would have been a virtual reality room like this. But is there really a value in going into a space like this unless you have some purpose? Right now, this is only trying to emulate what exists offline, and we need to give it a bit more of a signifier. And last but not least, I think we need to think about what the idea is behind what we are doing. So going back to that quote that we saw from Man Ray, when the camera came about, you started getting a lot of people first taking pictures of stuff, even being scared to smile because it might take your spirit, etc. Then in the late 19th century, you started getting people taking photographs to raise awareness about social causes. And then in the early 20th century, people started being creative with photography to not just show what exists offline, but to create new things that could never have existed without the camera. And those ideas were really interesting to share. And I think that we're at that stage with a lot of Web 3.0 now. We've been working a lot to emulate what exists offline, but what is the dream? What is the thing that makes you think? What is the thing that exists in Web 3.0 that could have never existed without all of this technology? And I curated an exhibition about artificial intelligence at a conference in Greece last year. And a guy came up to me and said that one of the artworks in the exhibition moved him much more than any artwork he had seen recently. And it looks like this. Now, that doesn't really look like a Web 3.0 artwork. It's a box with a hole. But let me tell you a little bit more about this artwork, and then maybe you'll understand what I mean about finding value in the semantic web. So this artist, Robbie Barrett, he uses AI to generate new images. He trains a generative, a GAN, to create new files based on reference images, right? And those artworks are created and trained by him. He worked together with a real artist called Ronan Barreau to look at a lot of skulls that this artist used to paint. And he trained a robot to create more skulls. So the robot would every time create new skulls. This box is a box where you look in and you'll click a button and a skull will be generated within that box that then disappears when you click the button again. And no one will ever see that image again. It's moving because you want to conserve that image. You feel responsible for that image. You are a custodian for that image. That image has value, but it will not survive except for in your own memory. And using AI, the artist has created an experience that personifies an idea about the impermanence of the web, about memento mori, about how we are all finite on this earth, but using Web 3.0. And I think that that is the type of thing that we should be creating to then really start generating valuable experiences in Web 3.0 that will unlock revenue opportunities. Thank you. Thank you so much for letting me give this presentation today. I hope that you enjoyed it. I hope it wasn't too abstract for you, but I want to remind you that you need to be pedantic about the semantic web.